4 years ago, my family and I found out that my dad had cancer. And during his battle, we spent much of our energy researching how to reverse his sickness. Unfortunately, my dad passed away later that year, but our research did not stop there. Over the past few years, my mom and I have been reading many books and learning from various doctors about health and the reasons why people get sick and how to prevent them. And through this process, we've learned about many misconceptions about health. And today we will be looking at the misconceptions about milk and why milk is actually not good for you. We'll be looking at 4 main misconceptions. The first being that it's natural to drink another species' milk. The second being that it's natural to drink milk after being weaned. The third, that milk is a good source of calcium. And 4, that pasteurized milk is safe to drink. Now the first one, it's actually unnatural to drink another species' milk. Now, Professor Walter Veith tells us in his lecture, Dairy Milk and Health Dangers, that the protein in milk is species specific. So the protein that's found in milk is geared toward that species and what that species needs to grow, especially in the early stages of growth. So the protein most commonly found in milk is casein. Now, if we look at this chart taken directly from his lecture, it shows us the amount of protein in different species milk. And then next to that, we see the time it takes for that species to double in size from birth. So human milk, we have 1.2 milligrams per liter, and it takes 120 days for humans to double in size. Horses have double that amount, 2.4 milligrams per liter, and the time to double in size is cut in half at 60. So there's a pretty strong correlation there. Now we see this continue with cow's milk being a little bit more potent and less time. Same with goat, dog, cat, and rat having the most protein and the quickest time to double in weight. Now if you just look at this, you would think, oh, well, that's good. We drink a lot of protein, we'll grow really quickly, and that's what we want, right? But it doesn't actually work this way. There's a very necessary and specific enzyme needed to break down this protein, and that enzyme is called renin. Now renin unravels the protein casein so that it can be properly metabolized and digested. Now we see these high levels of protein, and that also comes with these animals producing higher levels of renin. Now the human only produces 1.2 milligrams per liter, which is not that much, so it doesn't need that much renin. So when we drink cow's milk, we have the problem of not having enough renin to digest this protein. And if we have too much protein and not enough renin, then we can't properly digest it, and that puts a lot of stress on our kidneys. Professor Walter Veith tells us that the casein in cow's milk is geared towards skeletal and muscular development. So when cows are born, the first thing that they need to do is be able to walk and find food and keep up with their mothers, while humans aren't so focused on walking right away, but more brain development. So the protein in cow's milk is geared toward skeletal muscular development, while human milk is more geared toward brain development. It doesn't have as much protein since our brains aren't made up mainly of protein. It's mainly fat. So there's a difference in the milk. Cow's milk has more protein. We don't need that. That's why we don't have so much protein. A study from Pediatrics says that babies who are fed cow's milk increase in intestinal blood loss and loss of iron up to 30%. So the high potency of protein causes the milk to become acidic. And the baby's intestines can't handle this. It actually irritates them and causes them to bleed internally. And from this, they lose blood and therefore lose iron. Point number 2, it's actually unnatural to drink milk after being weaned. It's unnatural. Professor Dr. Walter Veith says that humans are the only mammal in the world that drink milk after being weaned. Now, why is this? Once an animal is weaned, it stops producing renin and can no longer digest the casein. So renin, the enzyme renin, is produced while we're infants and while we're drinking milk. And we produce it naturally as mammals because we need to break down this casein. But our bodies naturally stop producing it because we're not supposed to be drinking milk after being weaned. Point number 2, that it's unnatural to drink milk after being weaned, is that all adults are lactose intolerant. And that is because of lactase. Lactase is another enzyme that allows us to break down lactose. Now, what lactase does is it splits the lactose into two, into glucose and galactose. Okay, so most humans actually stop producing lactase after being weaned, but in many European countries, the people have actually adapted to continue to produce lactase because they've been drinking milk for so long. But even though that they're able to split the lactose in two, they're still left with glucose and galactose. Now the problem here is with galactose. Now, what all humans, all adults are missing is the enzyme beta-galactosidase. And that allows us to properly turn the galactose into glucose, into a good source of energy for us to use. Now, a study from Lancet Medical Journal showed that when dairy product consumption exceeds the enzyme's capacity to break down galactose, there's a buildup of galactose in the blood, which can lead to ovarian cancer. So this buildup of galactose, this excess galactose, is called galactosemia. Now, there are many negative health effects that come with this, some being low bone mineral density, liver damage or failure, bacterial infections, and reproductive problems. And you can find more statistics like these at Healthline. Point or misconception number 3, milk is actually not a good source of calcium. So yes, it's true, cows do have a lot of calcium, and you see that advertised everywhere. Cow's milk has 1,200 milligrams of calcium per quart, while human milk only has 300 milligrams of calcium per quart. Now there's all this excess, a lot of calcium, but the problem with cow's milk is that it's high in phosphorus and low in magnesium. Now, phosphorus prevents us from being able to digest the calcium and metabolize it. And magnesium is essential for breaking down that calcium, but there's too much phosphorus, so we can't break down the calcium, and not enough magnesium, so we also can't metabolize that calcium. So now we have all this extra calcium in our system that we can't properly metabolize, and this leads to kidney stones. Harvey Diamond, in his book In Fit for Life, A New Beginning, tells us It is a well-established fact that the high protein content of dairy products turns the blood acidic. So we already looked at this. The high protein making the milk acidic, which turns the blood acidic. And this draws calcium out of the bones. And this causes the body to actually lose more calcium than it takes in. Vitamin D is critical for calcium metabolism. That's why we see a lot of milk cartons advertising that there's added vitamin D. It's because we need vitamin D to absorb this calcium. But a study from American Journal of Clinical Nutrition shows that people who drink the most milk actually have the lowest levels of vitamin D, because we're using all that vitamin D to absorb all this calcium in cow's milk. So now we have a deficiency in calcium, either not being able to absorb it or it being pulled out of our bones because of the high acidity. This leads to osteoporosis, and osteoporosis is weak bones due to a lack of calcium. And misconception number 4, pasteurized milk is actually unhealthy for you. So what pasteurization actually is a heating process that is supposed to clean the milk and kill any bacteria and prevent food poisoning. But what that heat does is it kills essential nutrients like fatty acids, which are necessary in order to digest the fat properly in milk. So now we're left with extra fat particles in our bloodstream, in our arteries, and this leads to cardiovascular disease. In Raymond Francis's book, Never Be Sick Again, he tells us that calves fed raw milk remain healthy, but calves fed pasteurized milk typically die within 8 weeks. Now that does not seem natural. So, when most people hear this information, a lot of people are upset, and a lot of people refuse to believe it because they're angry that they've been lied to their whole lives on TV and on advertisement. But if you think about the motives, it makes sense. The dairy industry has been making a lot of money on people like you and me drinking milk, and why not aid their profits by paying for advertisements, advertising the health benefits of milk, such as higher protein content, high calcium, and high vitamin D, which all seem good on the surface, but if you look just a little bit deeper, you can see how these are actually not good for you.